most entrepreneurs are very creative. We use the term visionary a lot, which means there are way more ideas than time, energy, money, space, fill in any gap there
Right.
to actually implement all of them.
Are you feeling overwhelmed, stuck, or uncertain about how to grow your business without sacrificing what really matters most? Welcome to The Business You Really Want, the show for women ready to build a sustainable, fully aligned business. Aligned with what, you ask? You, your values, your life. Seriously, it is possible. I'm Tonya Kubo, and along with business advisor extraordinaire Gwen Bortner, we're here to show you how. Why do brilliant business strategies often end up collecting dust? Have you ever asked yourself that question? Because that is what we are exploring today. It's that gap between planning and execution. The best laid plans that never seem to actually turn out. So we're going to talk about that gap between planning and execution and how to build an implementation engine, so to speak, that turns your ideas into reality. I'm Tonya Kubo, joined yet again by my favorite business operations expert here, Gwen Bortner. And Gwen, today I just feel like you are the expert to be having this conversation with. Like, not that I interview anybody else on this show or talk to anybody else on this show specifically, but I am glad that I can talk to you about this on this show because I think you are so good, like just naturally skilled at helping me at least, but I think other people too, understand the difference between great ideas and ideas that are actionable. I see entrepreneurs all the time who excel at creating strategic plans, but just can't manage to get those plans into reality. And here's where I'm going to start with you, Gwen. Why does that happen? Or at least why do you think it happens?
There's probably two or three really overriding, kind of high level answers to this. And of course, all of these things always have lots and lots of details. But the first is most entrepreneurs are very creative. We use the term visionary a lot, which means there are way more ideas than time, energy, money, space, fill in any gap there,
right,
to actually implement all of them. And so being able to sift through them and decide which one's actually the one that we're going to do is definitely one factor. A related but slightly different factor is what we all call the squirrel factor, which is we start down a path and then we get to the part that's not quite as fun and something that's way more fun and way more shiny and way more new and, whoops, squirrel, we're now doing something else. So that's, I think, another piece. And then the third is just not having the tools. And when I say tools could be literally technology, but they could be people, there could be processes, there's all sorts of things to actually get them past what I'm going to call the squirrel point. Right. Because everything, absolutely everything has some version of the messy middle. And from idea to full implementation always has to go through the messy middle. And there has to be a way to help through that. None of us do the messy middle well if we don't have some sort of support.
Yeah. I'm a great starter and I'm a great finisher. I'm not a great slogger.
Very, very few people are, especially in the entrepreneurial space, which is part of the reason why we don't want to hire entrepreneurs to help us through some of these things. We actually, because there are people who really
I was like, then who do we hire?
We hire the sloggers.
Okay.
I mean, and that sounds really negative. I don't mean that at all. These people are amazing. Right. Because they're really good at doing the thing that just needs to be done. Tunka, 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 tunka. They are like a gear. We love gears. They're
we
gears.
Do love gears.
Chunk, 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 chunk. And so sometimes that is part of the solution. But for entrepreneurs, that messy middle is practically an impassable chasm.
Okay. Okay. So what do you think, like, what are the components of implementation success in your mind? Like, what are the three, if there's three, maybe there's five for you, but three, like, critical areas that if you don't have this, you are just not going to be able to implement effectively or successfully?
Right. So the first is, in my mind, and this will be one of those cases, there would be lots of right answers, but in my mind, the first is actually having a short enough list that it actually can get done.
Mm-hmm.
And this is where I'm talking about way too many ideas.
Right.
Okay. So it is actually discerning, prioritizing, sifting, whatever word that you want, to be able to actually pull that out. Right. That's one aspect.
Right.
The next is having the tools, the people, the processes, the places to actually get through the messy middle, and knowing, entering it not like with the hope that we'll get through it, but saying, we know we're going to hit it. We aren't necessarily sure exactly when we're going to hit it, but we know we're going to hit it. And this is how we're going to get through that.
Okay.
And for me, because we talk about it all the time, this is accountability. This is about having a real, true accountability process / system in place to be able to get through that messy middle piece. And then another element that I think is really important in this, and we talk about this during our quarterly planning process with our clients, and I know we've mentioned it before on the show, is what we call the good, better, best goals.
Right.
Because I think the other thing that happens as part of the strategy to the implementation is we dream big, which is great. There's nothing wrong with dreaming big. But when we set the goal where everything just has to go perfectly for us to reach it, the chance of us feeling successful, not that we weren't successful, but feeling successful, becomes so narrow that it makes getting through the messy middle even that much harder. Right. Because it's like, oh, but one thing went wrong, and now I know that I'm probably not going to hit it, and the all the self-talk, all the things happen. Where when we talk about good, better, best goals, good goals are we're going toward this, and we expect an 85 to 90% likelihood we'll hit this. The better is somewhere in the middle, usually in kind of the 50-50 range. And the best, which really was that pie in the sky dream we had, which usually for most entrepreneurs, this is the case. That's where they're always going. We know is a 10% or less likelihood. But we still have it because sometimes all the planets do align. So we don't stop when we hit the good goal. We move on to the better goal. We move on to the best goal.
Yeah. Okay. So is there anything else? Because that's 4.
There's probably others, but those are good for the moment.
Okay. So what I heard is, so the 3 critical components for implementation success in this case would be having a short enough list that it can get done. And, I would define that as saying you have very clear priorities, right? Not everything can be a priority. So you've got that nice short list. That way it can get done. You've got sufficient resources. You've got the right number and right makeup of people, of tools, of everything you need in order to achieve that short list of goals, that your strategic plan. Then you've got that adequate accountability. You've got some mechanism in place that is checking in consistently to make sure not just that you're doing what you said you would do, but that the project keeps moving forward. And if it gets stalled for any reason, that, part of having adequate accountability is exploring why, what happened, what's preventing it, so that those things can be controlled for. Is that accurate so far?
So far.
And then finally, what you threw in there were making sure that the goals have good, better, best targets. And I love this. And, I've told this story a million times. I don't know if I've told it on the show yet, but I, in many cases, work with clients who want to set one goal. And their one goal is based on, 25% growth, or their one goal is based on a specific revenue target. And in many cases, they don't take their own historical data into account when they set the goal.
Yes.
And so then what that leads to do, right? If the only win is 25% growth year over year, and the best you've ever done is 5%.
Right. You're just setting yourself up to feel like a failure. You're not a failure at 5% growth, but you feel like a failure, which is where the real problem lies.
Right. So we need clear priorities. We need sufficient resources. We need adequate accountability. And we actually need good, better, best targets so that we give ourselves multiple places to win.
Yep.
Now, from there, I think you probably work with more clients on implementation than anybody else I know.
Which, of course, is ironic because I don't actually do anything.
Well, you don't do implementation, but you support the entrepreneur in achieving the goals that they say they want, right? That's when people hire you. People hire you all the time because, and I know this because I've sat in those meetings where they're like, well, this has been on my vision board for the last 3 years, and I don't feel like I'm any closer to it now than I was 3 years ago. So maybe you'll see something I won't see. And what always cracks me up, Gwen, is you're the first person to be like, and then they'll tell you, right? And this is something else we hear. I accomplished more this last quarter than I have accomplished any year prior. And you're like, well, that's funny because I don't feel like I did anything. I don't feel like I worked that hard. But it's that process of supporting them implementing the goals that they've set out to that I think they just haven't had before.
So, we talked about the 4 things, and the hardest of the 4, because it's the part that folks, I think, are less aware of and why it's important, is the 3rd one. It's the accountability piece. Because when you're the boss, when you're the CEO, when you're the owner, when you're the entrepreneur, whatever title you like to use for yourself in this role, who's holding you accountable? And, I was having a conversation. They said, oh, I'm self-accountable. And I know, and I said, so where did you hear that? And she said, that was out of Brene Brown. And of course, Brene Brown is
never going to argue.
super smart woman, right? But I would say self-accountability is not a thing.
Right.
Right. This would be, I don't have the opportunity. Maybe someday I will. I would love to have this discussion with Brene Brown live to say, tell me what you define as self-accountability, because I don't believe it's possible. Because we can be dependable, we can be effective, there's all sorts of things, but accountability requires actual people feedback 2-way, and we can't do that with ourselves. We need another person or group. It could be people, it doesn't have to be a person, but we need another living, breathing, thoughtful entity as part of real, true accountability. And a lot of people have conflated accountability with getting things done. That's not actually the same either. That's doing tasks. That's being dependable. Which is also important. Not saying that's not a useful thing, because, oh my God, that's a super useful thing. But still different, because the accountability is saying when we're not making or taking the action that we said we were going to take, it's not just saying, well, shame on you, bad person, that's a whole different thing. That's also not accountability. It really is saying, so why? What is the situation that's preventing this moving forward? Sometimes it's because it's no longer the thing we actually need to do, but we haven't consciously said that yet. Right? It's not like, well, you need to do it. It's like, maybe you don't need to do it, but then that means let's take it off the list. Right?
Yeah.
Other times it's because things like, oh, I've got way too many things on the list. Okay, well then we need to winnow down the list and or prioritize the list, right? There's lots of, sometimes it's because I'm actually not sure what the next step is. Okay, well that's a whole different problem too. But real accountability is a reflection process, not a judgmental process. And you can't, you can reflect in a mirror, but you can't actually reflect in the way that we're talking about accountability without another person.
Okay. So I feel like you just ran us through a whole laundry list of...
I probably did, because that's what I do.
Yeah, common implementation pitfalls. And so what I heard is a lack of true accountability, because like you said, you know, true accountability is a process of reflection. It's not a process of judgment. And so, you know, if you struggle with implementation, it could simply be because nobody's checking in with you, and nobody's checking in with you in a way that helps you reflect versus makes you feel bad, or you allow yourself to be made to feel bad about what you did or didn't do. So that was one pitfall that you shared. Another is, I'm going to call it overwhelm, although I don't think that's the best word. But there's all this stuff on the list, and, you know, not all of it needs to be done by you. Not all of it may need to be done right now. Not all of it may need to be done at all. Right? And so that's a pitfall, right? We set the strategic plan and we were like, we're going to do all these things. And then push comes to shove, and we never stop to look at, oh, thing one we thought was going to be a week of work. Thing one actually turned into 3 weeks of work. Right. And you and me, I mean, we've talked about it on the show before. I mean, that was our, you know, it started off with, we need a logo for this brand new podcast we're launching, to we're going to completely rebrand and redo our website. We did not start off there at all.
No, we did not.
And yet there we were. So there's that piece. There's all this stuff, and not all of it is essential. But then there's also sometimes you go through the whole list and there really is too much to do and it hasn't been prioritized. I mean, think about it in our case, Gwen. How many times did you and me have conversations as this new podcast logo project became a beast in and of itself, where we had conversations about what had to come first?
Oh, all the time. And also what had to come off the list.
Right.
Right.
And what had to shift?
What had to shift, sometimes in big ways. Sometimes it was timeline, and sometimes it was in forever. You know, and until we got there, we wouldn't have known that was the conversation that needed to be had, which is also part of it.
Right. It's like we couldn't have predicted that. And then the final pitfall you shared is sometimes you're just stuck. You don't know the next step to take. You don't maybe know who to ask the next step to take. And if you are a solopreneur or you're a business owner who doesn't actually have a team that provides through true thought partnership, there may be nobody there to help you get unstuck.
Well, and a lot of entrepreneurs don't have someone who can provide true thought partnership. Because of a couple elements. One is their brains work differently than a lot of the people that they're going to hire that are going to be really good at the things that they're hiring them for. Right. So the conversation is always just kind of missing the mark on both sides. Right. And not that anyone's bad, not that anyone's not having good conversations. It's just, it's the nature of it. Right. That's part of it. And the other is a level of experience and knowledge, right? And we talked about this a few episodes back. The idea of a corner man is one of those ideas of someone who's seen enough things, even if they aren't like the expert in your industry, but because they've seen enough things, they can extrapolate appropriately and help you say, what about A, B, or C? Let's think about those as next steps. And usually when someone gives you, 2 or 3 choices, it's like, oh, B is exactly the right thing that I need to do. And it's like, great, go do B. Right. I mean, and that's the piece that a lot of times where people start feeling like their accountability process, whatever it is failing, is they're either in an organization where all they're doing is saying, did you do the task or did you not do the task? And if you didn't do the task, there's kind of a shame on you. Or if you did do the task, woohoo. Well, we always want to woohoo on the task, but instead of shame on you if you didn't, it's like, so let's figure out what's happening there. Right? That's a different thing. The other thing, a lot of times, the accountability systems that people have is they've got people that are really at their level, or, maybe a tiny bit above or a tiny bit below. It's like they don't actually have enough other resources to do that unblock piece. And so you feel like you've got accountability, but it's back to they may be asking the right questions, but they can't help you with the answers, which is a different piece of the accountability.
Yeah. Okay. That's helpful. So how do you recommend? So let's say we've got a listener here, and they are going, gosh, yeah, that's me all the time. I set great goals. I have plans. I just can never quite make them happen. We've given them all this criteria, right? Clear priorities, sufficient resources, adequate accountability. We've told them the common pitfalls. We've told them how to avoid them. What can they do to assess their implementation capabilities? Like what do they need to do to survey what's possible for them right now?
All the questions are usually really hard questions. Some folks can ask themselves those hard questions, but often you need an outside person to ask those hard questions. And of course, you want that to be someone that you feel like you trust, because hard questions make you uncomfortable. And if it's someone I barely know, it's like, you don't get to ask me that.
Right.
Right. We could go back to our 531 conversation we had some time ago with you. I asked you really hard questions, but you still, because we've worked together, we've known each other for a really long time. You trusted me that I wasn't going to, just, strip you naked and throw you out in a highly uncomfortable way. But I did ask you uncomfortable questions, and I still commend you for being willing to do that. But that is part of that process. That is part of that accountability, is someone else asking some really hard questions and saying, yeah, you've listed all of these things, but which of these do you actually want to do? And asking it sometimes in 2 or 3 different ways to see if we start getting consistent answers or inconsistent answers. And sometimes you'll have someone in your circle, that's your biz bestie or whatever, that can totally do that. Some folks will try and do it with other family members, which I'm always a little hesitant on, because often they've got their own agenda, which they may not even realize they have their own agenda. But sometimes they can. So I'm not saying that's an absolute no either. And then other times you really do need to bring in an outside resource. And so even recently, one of my clients that is a past client reached out in the last week and said, hey, I want to do an exercise with you. She's just bringing me in for an hour. I'm not expecting to start working with her on an ongoing basis, but she knows that outside perspective is going to provide her value in looking at some goals, some prepping, some accountability, asking her some hard questions. And so it doesn't necessarily have to be an ongoing relationship, but this is also why we have what we call the weekly course of action as our foundational piece with all of our clients. Some folks do it only as the weekly course of action. They're not working with me on, a private client basis or in my group program, but the group program and my private clients also do the WCA, because it's a way to hold accountability and to see what's going on in an asynchronous way that turns out to be exceedingly productive. Because your comment says we see people all the time. these are people that are only doing the WCA. They are not working with me in group program. They are not working with me, in a private client kind of basis. And yet they're also seeing huge results because of that accountability, knowing that someone's going to look at it, knowing someone is there if they've got a question, knowing, all of these elements really are making a difference for them to be able to move their own needle going forward.
Yeah. Well, and I like that you pointed out, because what I always tell people is like, nobody is too good for accountability, right? Like the reason everybody does the weekly course of action, because I do think some people try to, obviously not our clients, because our clients are superlative. Let me just make that clear.
They're flipping amazing. Yeah.
Right. But some people try to buy their way out of accountability.
Yes.
Right. And, that just doesn't fly with us, simply because if you can't, like, if you're not ready for regular accountability, there are probably other things that are really important to move your business forward that you're just not ready for. Now, I was going to ask you, Gwen, okay, Gwen, now is the part of the show where you give us practical steps for building and maintaining your implementation engine. But I feel like you've given us those steps throughout the episode this time. But are there any you want to call out, like step 1, step 2, step 3, in a particular order?
So I really think the order I gave it is the order, the kind of the four big things. And the first is staying really aware of how many things are on the plate. Right. And we talk about that when we do our quarterly tune-up with our clients, is if people are like, I've got 5 goals. It's like, yeah, that's probably somewhere between 2 and 4 goals too many.
Right.
Because we want you to stay focused. And that's part, to me, that's also part of accountability, quite honestly, is staying focused. Once you've gotten clear on what those are, then it is about the squirrel factor. Are we adding new things? And we are the first to admit, we aren't saying that you can't, but we are saying it has to be a trade.
Yeah.
Right. Because sometimes we go down a path and it's like, oh my gosh, this is not what I thought. I want to do something different. And we wouldn't have known without getting partway down the path. I don't think you have to finish the path. You could totally stop and turn left there.
Nobody wins awards for being martyrs in entrepreneurship.
They do not. But we need to be really clear. We're turning left, which means we are no longer going straight.
Yeah.
And that needs to be communicated fully throughout the whole organization and all of those pieces. That's the second piece of it. Is okay to get excited about a shiny object so long as it's really the thing you want to do, and realize you're trading that for something else.
Yeah, because what you're really talking about, right, is that if you want a truly successful implementation plan, you've got to be willing to consistently evaluate what the plan was, the steps you're taking to get there, and then make adjustments as necessary. I think of one of our clients who had started out their quarter. So they have online courses, and they had started out their quarter going, we have to update our courses. And shortly thereafter, and they had set a goal. They were going to launch one brand new redesigned course every single month. And they were like, that's what I'm going to do. It's going to be awesome. But they also had to switch, they discovered in the process, they had to actually switch platforms because the course platform they were on wasn't going to give them the student experience they wanted. And yet they were still in their mind thinking, I have to redesign and newly launch and market and sell one course every single month, until in the process of their weekly reflection, recognizing that migration alone, when you have a bunch of courses, is a 3-month process.
It's kind of like our marketing thing that we did for a little bit.
It's exactly. Well, and I share this because it's like, we have not cornered the market on the best laid plans, and neither have our clients. Neither has anybody listening. Everybody, I think, in business goes through this. And I think that's why the accountability piece is both so powerful for business owners, but also so foreign.
Yeah. And that's where that next step is so important, that ongoing accountability, because the ongoing accountability is dealing with the messy middle.
Right.
Right. It's how we get through the messy middle to say, no, you're making progress. I know it doesn't feel like it, but because sometimes it is the attaboy, as it were, right? It's
right.
the attagal. It's you are making progress. Just keep going. I know it doesn't feel like it. Just keep going. Just keep going. And sometimes it's like, oh, you're stuck. Let me help you. Let me give you a shove from the back because we need to do. But the accountability really is that messy middle piece.
Yeah.
Of how do we get through that messy middle? That really is the big piece. And then, the other piece that ties into that, and that's where the accountability helps, is do I actually have the right tools, the right people, the right things to actually get where I need to be? Can I do my good, better, best goal, or do I not? Right. And that is all of the good, better, get best applies to that whole thing of saying, am I setting something realistic, or am I setting myself up? And like I said, not for failure, but to feel like I'm failing. Because most of the time when I talk to somebody and feel like they fail, it's like, that doesn't actually hit me as a real failure.
Right. You're like predicting the future.
Why it feels like it to you. But I don't think that's actually a full-on failure.
It's where you say, like, being human actually isn't a failure, okay? Not being able to predict the future, not actually a failure. Like, those are not character flaws. That is just how life continues to life.
Yeah, it's your example of 5% growth versus 25% growth. 5% growth is not failure.
No.
Bankruptcy might possibly be failure.
Possibly. Burning your business to the ground, going back to our very first episode, right? Could be failure.
Could actually be failure. Maybe even that may not be failure. But setting this goal and not achieving it may not be failure.
Right. Okay. Well, I think that brings us to the end of today's show, where we have been highlighting how important it is to bridge that gap between great plans and actually putting those plans into action, going from planning to implementation. And if you would like support in examining other aspects of your business, like Gwen and I, we've got a little something special for you. We have Insight to Impact, which is a premium weekly email subscription that helps you gain clarity on your business, just one reflection at a time. So each Friday, you'll receive a thought-provoking question designed to help you examine specific aspects of your business. And when you respond, you'll get personal feedback to help you implement positive change. Consider it light accountability, right? It's a great test to see if you're ready for that true reflective process of accountability. And you can head over to everydayeffectiveness.com/impact to learn more. Thanks for tuning in to The Business You Really Want with Gwen Bortner. I'm Tonya Kubo, reminding you that sustainable success is within reach. Make sure to subscribe to the show and visit thebusinessyoureallyWant.com for more resources. Until next time, keep dreaming big and acting with intention.